On the night of April 25, 2026, something happened inside the Russian Air Force that their generals did not want to admit. Something that wiped out the most expensive, most modern, and rarest fighter jets that Moscow still possessed at a base no one thought could be attacked, on a night when Russia saw absolutely nothing coming. That base was located deep inside the Ural Mountains, 1,700 kilometers from the Ukrainian front lines, close to the Asian border, farther than any attack Ukraine had ever carried out in the entire history of the war. This was the place where Russia had secretly moved its Su-57s, Russia's only fifth-generation fighters, each worth more than $100 million, with a total number of fewer than 30 combat-ready aircraft in the entire world. This was the place where Russia hid its Su-34s, the backbone of the entire glide bomb campaign that is devastating Ukrainian defense lines every day. And this was the place where the Russian command had bet everything on one single assumption. They signed 700 kilometers was far enough. Ukraine could not possibly reach it. But on the night of April 25, that assumption was wrong. And the price of that mistake, measured in money and strategy and things Russia has no ability to replace, is what I will explain to you in this video. Because what happened at Shagol base that night was not just an attack. It was proof that an entirely new era of warfare has just begun. The question is, what did Russia do to end up having to run so far away? And why was even 700 kilometers still not enough? To understand why the night of April 25 happened, you need to understand what had been happening in the many months before it. Because the decision to move Russia's most valuable aircraft to Shagol base was not a calculated plan. It was the panicked reaction of a command that was gradually losing control of the situation. Let's start from 2024, when Ukraine first attacked the Chelyabinsk base in the Astrakhan region deep inside Russian territory, the place Russia used to develop and test the very Su-57s they considered their ultimate weapon. 2 Su-57s were damaged in that attack. Russia confirmed it. And that was the first time Moscow truly woke up to a reality they did not want to face, that no base on their territory was truly safe anymore. But Chelyabinsk was only the beginning. Throughout 2024 and 2025, the Engels base, home to strategic bombers Tu-95 and Tu-160, the backbone of Russia's entire long-range strike force, was hit by Ukrainian drones multiple times in succession. Each attack was a reminder that distance was no longer a reliable shield. And then on June 1, 2025, Operation Spiderweb happened, and everything changed completely. Ukraine deployed 117 drones not by flying them from its own territory, but by hiding them inside ordinary wooden cabins loaded on civilian trucks, driving across Russian territory unnoticed, parking right outside the gates of 5 strategic air bases spread across 4,300 kilometers, and launching them simultaneously. More than 40 aircraft were destroyed or heavily damaged in a single night, including Tu-95s, Tu-22M3s, and A-50s, the airborne early warning systems that Russia has very few of and no ability to replace quickly. That was the decisive psychological blow. After Spiderweb, the Russian command could no longer pretend that the rear was safe. The evacuation decision was approved at the highest level, hastily, urgently, and if you look closely at how it was carried out, you will see clear signs of panic rather than calculation. The entire Su-57 and Su-34 fleet from bases in western Russia was withdrawn to Shagol base in Chelyabinsk Oblast, east of the Urals, close to the Asian border, through a massive logistics operation carried out entirely in the shadows. Military trains running at night, covered trucks with no markings, and direct flights conducted in complete radio silence, with no signal allowed to be emitted. And meanwhile, the billion-dollar infrastructure at Chelyabinsk and Engels was left behind like empty shells, with no valuable assets left inside to protect. But the bases themselves had become open targets, death traps for anyone still there. Now, Russia's logic in this decision was not baseless. The Ural Mountains are a natural defensive line that has existed for centuries in Russian military thinking, a geographic boundary that history has proven extremely difficult to breach. And 700 kilometers, according to all the data Russian intelligence had at the time about Ukraine's drone capabilities, was beyond the technical limits of any long-range strike system Kiev possessed. That was the assumption Moscow bet everything on. But there was one thing the evacuation decision itself inadvertently revealed, something the Russians did not want to admit publicly. They were afraid. And this is the important thing to understand, because a country that is truly confident in its defense systems does not need to move its aircraft out of range. They leave the aircraft there and shoot down anything that dares to fly in. The evacuation itself is proof that Russia does not trust its own defenses. But the problem did not stop there, because the way Russia carried out this evacuation committed a basic tactical mistake so fundamental that even first-year students at any military school are taught to avoid it, instead of dispersing the forces to multiple different locations to minimize risk. the most elementary principle of managing high-value military assets. Russia concentrated all of its rarest and irreplaceable assets into a single location. Shagol became the place with the highest concentration density of advanced fighter aircraft in the entire Russian Air Force, and in the eyes of any strategist looking at that map, Shagol had become a jackpot, a target of extremely high value packaged into a single location, protected by one single assumption that Ukraine could not reach it. And that assumption, as I said from the beginning, was built on data about Ukraine's drone capabilities from 2022 and 2023, when the war had just begun and Kiev's drone technology was still in its early stages. After Operation Spiderweb, Ukraine in 2026 was a completely different technical entity, and Russia had not updated its assumption in time. The result was that Russia turned a decision designed to protect assets into a decision that created the perfect target. Shagol was the product of fear, and that very fear led to the failure Russia had done everything to try to avoid. To understand why what happened at Shagol matters so much, you need to understand exactly what Ukraine destroyed that night. The Su-57 fell on as Russia's only fifth-generation fighter. The machine Moscow designed as a direct answer to America's F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning II, priced from $100 to $120 million each, depending on the avionics package. On paper, it is a monster. The N036 Belka active phased array radar, capable of tracking multiple targets simultaneously at extreme distances, R-37M long-range air-to-air missiles stored completely inside internal weapons bays to maintain minimum radar cross-section, DRF laser countermeasures to protect the aircraft from heat-seeking missiles, superior supermaneuverability, and speeds up to Mach 2. Russia has promoted the Su-57 at every international air show, every defense forum, every meeting with potential customers as living proof that Russian aviation technology is on par, even superior to the West. But here is what Russia never wants you to focus on, the real numbers. As of May 2026, the total number of Su-57s produced, including the 10 test prototypes from previous years that were never designed for combat, is only around 30 to 42 aircraft. The actual number combat-ready, meaning fully tested and equipped to engage directly, under 30. Let's number sink in for a moment. Russia signed a contract to produce 76 Su-57s in 2019, with a target completion by 2027, and as of the time Shagol was attacked, they had not reached even half that number after nearly a decade. And the production rate is not slow. It is a trickle. In 2025, estimates show only 0 to 2 aircraft were delivered to the Russian Air Force. In December 2024, Defense Mirror estimated Russia received only 7 aircraft for the entire year of 2024. For comparison, America produces dozens of F-35s per month. But the story is even worse, because in April 2026, right before the Shagol attack, a key composite materials workshop at the Kane-AZZ plant, the main production facility for the Su-57, burned and destroyed about 300 specialized components, including wing structures and control surfaces. Russia's already fragile production capacity for the Su-57 was further reduced at the worst possible time. And if that were not enough, Ukrainian Defense Intelligence released a notable finding. Of the 103 companies involved in the Su-57 production chain, about 1/3 have still not been sanctioned by any member of the sanctions coalition, meaning they are still importing foreign components through third countries, bypassing loopholes the West has not yet closed. The question is, why are the numbers so low after all these years of investment? The answer lies in the sanctions the West imposed after 2022, which cut off the advanced electronics supply chain that the Su-57 depends on entirely. Russia was forced to produce substitute components under a program called import substitution, but the process is slow, unstable, and consistently produces products inferior to the originals in precision and reliability. Worse still, leaked classified documents analyzed in 2025 revealed a truth Russia tried to hide. Many Su-57s delivered to the Air Force lack targeting pods, meaning the most expensive aircraft Russia produces cannot operate with the full advertised capabilities. They are delivering incomplete Su-57s just to meet paper targets. And here is the core paradox you need to understand about the Su-57. A machine designed to dominate the skies, but so valuable that no one dares let it fly into real danger. Throughout the war, not a single Su-57 has been allowed to operate in areas with Ukrainian Patriot systems, not one. They are only used to launch cruise missiles from safe distances deep inside Russian territory, or to conduct radar tests in risk-free airspace, because losing one Su-57 means losing something Russia has no ability to replace for many years, and the command knows that better than anyone. Outside the battlefield, the Su-57 is also the most important marketing card for Russia's defense industry. Russia is offering it to India, to Middle Eastern nations, and especially to Algeria, the country believed to have received the first 2 Su-57Es at the end of 2025. becoming the world's first export customer for a fifth-generation fighter outside the United States. That was a huge marketing milestone that Russia invested heavily in building. But think about what happens to that marketing story when satellite images spread around the world, showing Su-57s destroyed on the ground at Shagol, by drones costing a few tens of thousands of dollars, before they could even take off, at a base Russia claimed was absolutely safe. No customer wants to pay $100 million for an aircraft destroyed by cheap drones while parked at a supposedly impregnable base. The fifth-generation King of the Skies story cannot coexist with those images. And here is the strategic consequence that no number can fully measure. Losing one Su-57 at Shagol is not losing one aircraft. It is losing an irreplaceable part of a hard-limited arsenal. In a context where the production facility just burned, the supply chain is still disrupted, and the replenishment rate has never exceeded single digits per year. The remaining Su-57s, the ones not destroyed at Shagol, now have to be protected even more carefully than before. That means they are kept even farther from the battlefield. And that means they become even more useless in the real war happening every day. This is the paradoxical circle the Su-57 has been trapped in from the beginning. And after Shagol, there is no feasible way out. But there is one detail in this entire story that I want you to stop and think about carefully, because this is what completely changes the way you look at what happened at Shagol. The entire secret Russian evacuation campaign, the military trains running in the darkness of night, complete radio silence, the unnamed base deep in the heart of the Urals that barely appeared in any news, all of it was built on one single assumption that Ukraine did not know, that all that secrecy, all that caution, all those efforts to hide were enough to keep Russia's most valuable aircraft safe. That assumption was completely wrong. Ukraine knew the tail numbers of every aircraft moved to Shagol. It knew the exact parking coordinates where they were placed. It knew precisely how many had landed and exactly where they were standing on the apron. All of that was known even before the wheels of the first Su-57 touched down on the Shagol runway. The mechanism behind this was not luck or coincidence. Ukraine's cyber intelligence units had decoded anomalies in the Russian military rail network schedule many weeks before the entire relocation was complete. Real-time satellite data was seamlessly merged with information from domestic collaborator networks. People operating deep inside Russian territory, quietly sending specific coordinates via encrypted messages directly from the field. Shagol base had been marked on Ukraine's target map before Russia even finished the move, and that means while Russia was congratulating itself on a successful secret operation, Ukraine was already planning what would happen next. This was not the first time this principle had been proven. In Operation Spiderweb, Ukraine did not need to fly drones 4,300 kilometers to attack the Belaya base deep in Siberia. They brought the drones into Russia inside ordinary wooden cabins loaded on civilian trucks, trained AI to recognize and attack targets using real aircraft displayed in Ukrainian aviation museums as training data, and recruited completely unwitting Russian truck drivers to carry the weapons right to the gates of their own bases. Russia was defeated not by superior technology but by information, by the reality that in modern warfare on the digital and satellite battlefield of the 21st century, no secret lasts long enough to become real safety. Shagol was another version of that same principle, and that leads straight to the question, what weapon did Ukraine send to Shagol on the night of April 25, and why could none of the defense systems Russia ever built and invested billions of rubles in stop it? If the Su-57 is something Russia dares not use, then the Su-34 is something Russia cannot do without. The Su-34 fullback is a two-seat tactical bomber with a unique cockpit design unlike any other tactical fighter in the world. The two pilots sit side by side instead of in the usual tandem front and back arrangement, creating a wider, more comfortable cockpit for missions lasting many continuous hours. And that is no coincidence, because the Su-34 was designed precisely for those kinds of missions. Each aircraft costs between $35 and $50 million, can carry more than 8 tons of weapons on a single flight, and that is a payload figure few tactical aircraft in the world can match. But what makes the Su-34 truly terrifying in this war is not its size or speed, it is what it carries. The Fab 500, Fab 1500, and Fab 3000 glide bombs, the weapons causing the heaviest damage to Ukrainian defense lines in Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, and Donetsk, are all dropped from Su-34s. These are multi-ton bombs fitted with glide wings and guidance systems, turning them from crude weapons into precision munitions with ranges of dozens of kilometers after release. And the battlefield results reflect exactly Russia's dependence on this weapon. From 140 Su-34s in service at the beginning of the invasion, As of May 2026, Russia has confirmed the loss of at least 41 aircraft, shot down by Ukrainian air defenses enhanced with AI, combined with Patriot and new generation Western surface-to-air missiles, leaving only about 100 operational. One-third of the fleet has disappeared. Now understand why that matters at the strategic level, because this is what most news reports miss when covering the Su-34. While the Su-57 is a symbol, something Russia uses to show the world it has technology on par with the West, the Su-34 is the tool carrying the real, daily burden of the war, every day, every hour, on every section of trench in eastern Ukraine. And that tool is being worn down at a rate Russia has no ability to compensate for. The glide bomb tactic is not Russia's preferred choice. It is the solution they were forced to develop to compensate for an unchangeable reality. Russia cannot control the airspace over Ukrainian territory, where Kiev's Patriot and integrated air defense systems create a death zone for any aircraft that flies in. Instead of flying into that zone, Su-34s launch bombs from safe distances deep inside Russian territory or buffer zones, letting the glide bombs find their own way to the target using guidance systems, a tactic that allows Russia to continue inflicting damage on Ukraine without putting pilots in direct danger. That is why losing Su-34s at Shagol is particularly worse than losing Su-34s on the battlefield, in a way that sounds paradoxical but is completely logical. On the battlefield, the risk of losing aircraft is part of a calculation that has already been made, already accepted, with contingency plans in place. Every Su-34 squadron flying missions knows there is a probability they will not return, and the Russian command has built its entire strategy with a clear understanding of that attrition rate. But at Shagol, a place declared absolutely safe, completely outside every risk scenario Moscow had ever planned contingencies for, the Su-34s lost were losses not included in any calculation table, not in any scenario Russian military planners had ever prepared to handle. And every Su-34 lost, whether at Shagol or on the battlefield, leaves a double gap that cannot be filled quickly. The loss of an airframe that takes many years to produce under normal conditions, and even longer under current sanctions, and the loss of experienced pilots, people who have accumulated thousands of flight hours on that specific aircraft type, people who require many years of specialized training that cannot be shortened by any accelerated program. The battlefield consequence is simple and brutal math. Glide bomb pressure on Ukrainian defense lines decreases directly with the number of remaining Su-34s still capable of flying missions. Russia is forced to be more cautious, to weigh every mission of every remaining Su-34 more carefully, and that caution means the pace of attack slows, meaning Ukraine gains more time to reorganize defenses in the areas under the heaviest pressure. And this attrition loop has no natural stopping point. Ukraine continues attacking, Su-34s continue to be lost gradually with each mission and each attack like Shagol. Glide bomb capability shrinks month by month, and Russia has no way to replenish fast enough to balance the equation. And now we come to the question, what weapon did this? And why could the entire defense system Russia built and invested billions of rubles in not stop it? The force that carried out the attack on Shagol was Ukraine's Unmanned Systems Forces, the world's first independent armed force established specifically for drone warfare, a concept that had never existed in military history before Ukraine created it. The main unit was Magyar's Birds Brigade, specifically the independent UAV center No. 1, the people who designed, planned, and executed one of the most precise long-range attacks in the history of modern warfare. The weapon used was the Lyuty drone, official designation An-196, a long-range strike system with an official operational range of up to 2,000 kilometers, carrying a warhead from 50 to 75 kilograms, using a hybrid guidance system combining inertial and satellite navigation. In addition to Lyuty, Ukraine also operates the FP-1, another long-range strike drone being produced at an estimated rate of about 100 units per day at a cost of around $55,000 each, accounting for about 60% of the total number of deep strikes into Russian territory. In the Shagol attack, drones carrying approximately 100-kilogram warheads flew continuously for more than 10 hours, hugging the terrain at treetop level in complete darkness, crossing the cold and remote Urals without triggering any Russian warning systems. And in the final phase, the moment that decided everything, those drones suddenly climbed and dove into the targets at the optimal approach angle, precisely the blind spot of most point defense systems Russia had deployed at the base. The result was 2 Su-57s, 1 Su-34, and 1 unidentified Sukhoi aircraft, a total of 4 aircraft heavily damaged in one night. In addition, a technical service vehicle parked right between the 2 Su-57s was also completely destroyed. On May 1, Commander Robert Magyar Brovdy publicly announced the results in an uncompromising tone, accompanied by comparative satellite images from the OSINT channel Exilenova Plus, Contrasting photos from April 17 and April 26 clearly confirming the full extent of the damage. And those images also captured a scene that says everything. Russia was using tow trucks to move the wreckage of damaged aircraft to distant corners of the apron, while using large tarps to cover what could not be moved, trying to hide it from the next satellite pass. Moscow had to send engineers and special inspectors from the capital to Shagol to assess the actual damage, because the extent of destruction exceeded the local forces' ability to evaluate on site. And if you think Shagol was the peak, look at what happened immediately afterward. Just 5 days after the attack, on April 30, Lyuty struck the Lukoil Permneftyorg Syntez oil refinery in Perm, more than 500 kilometers from Ukraine, for the second time in 2 consecutive days after the first strike on April 29. As of May 8, Ukraine had attacked the same plant 3 times in less than 2 weeks. In the entire month of April 2026, Ukraine claimed to have attacked 14 oil refineries across Russian territory, with estimated economic damage reaching up to $7 billion since the beginning of 2026. This is no longer isolated attacks for psychological effect. This is a systematic economic attrition campaign carried out at a speed and scale that Russia has no effective defense against. Now, to the most important question, why did the entire GPS jammer system that Russia invested billions of rubles in, something once promoted as an impregnable electronic shield, prove completely useless against these drones? The answer lies in how the Lyuty was designed to navigate. Its system is hybrid. The inertial part operates completely independently of GPS, calculating position based on acceleration and direction without needing any external signal. The optical terrain recognition part uses AI to continuously compare camera images with preloaded terrain maps from before takeoff, self-correcting the route in real time. Jamming the GPS of something that does not rely on GPS to find its way is completely meaningless, like trying to block the radio signal of someone using a paper map and a compass. Russia built its entire deep defense doctrine on the wrong assumption, and the Americans realized this before Russia did. After Operation Spiderweb, the U.S. military replicated the entire campaign at Exilenova in an exercise called Operation Clear Horizon, analyzing every step, every decision, every weakness in the defense system that Ukraine had exploited. Their conclusion: the need for simultaneous data integration from radar, anti-drone systems, and the drones themselves into a single unified network. What Russia lacks is exactly that, and Operation Clear Horizon directly influenced the $175 billion Golden Dome program that America is implementing to protect its own territory. If the world's #1 superpower feels the need to spend $175 billion to protect itself from the threat of drones costing a few tens of thousands of dollars, then Russia, with fewer resources, more outdated defense technology, a sanctions-cut supply chain, and an enemy producing 100 drones per day right on its doorstep, is facing a problem for which it has no answer in hand. And now let's step back and look at the big picture, because the real question after everything that happened at Shagol is what Russia can do next to get out of this situation. And the answer, when you analyze each option seriously, is that there is no right answer. The first option Russian planners might consider is withdrawing aircraft even deeper into Siberia, increasing the distance to a level that even Lyuty cannot reach. It sounds reasonable until you remember that Lyuty already has an official operational range of up to 2,000 kilometers, and more importantly, in Operation Spiderweb, Ukraine attacked the Belaya base in Irkutsk, 4,300 kilometers from Ukraine, not by flying drones the entire distance, but by bringing drones into Russia inside civilian trucks. Geographic distance is no longer a shield in the world Ukraine is operating in, because Ukraine has proven it can deliver weapons anywhere on Russian territory through routes that no radar system can detect. And even setting aside the range issue, remote makeshift bases deep in Siberia lack the entire specialized maintenance infrastructure that complex aircraft like the Su-57 need to operate, lacking specially trained technical personnel, lacking rapid resupply and weapons capability, lacking the entire logistics chain a modern airbase needs to keep aircraft combat ready. The aircraft may exist physically, but they will no longer be weapons. The second option is to disperse the fleet to smaller bases to reduce the value of each individual target, the logic being that if no place concentrates enough aircraft, then no single attack can cause decisive damage. But the problem is that Ukraine can coordinate simultaneous attacks on multiple locations at extremely low cost. Because when each drone costs only a few tens of thousands of dollars, launching 10 attacks at once on 10 different bases is still much cheaper than the value of what is destroyed. Dispersion does not solve the range problem. It only increases the number of targets Russia needs to protect, without increasing corresponding defensive capability. The third option is to pull S-400 systems from the front lines to protect rear bases, and this is the most dangerous choice of the three, because every S-400 system removed from the front creates an air defense gap that Ukraine can immediately exploit with missiles and fighter aircraft. Protecting the rear by emptying the front is a trade-off Russia cannot afford in any scenario, because the front is where the real war is being decided every day, and every gap there can lead to immediate and irreversible consequences. There is no fourth option. This is the classic definition of a strategic trap. Being forced to choose between bad options, with no good choice, no clean escape feasible. But the damage from Shagol does not stop at what can be measured by aircraft numbers or material value, because the psychological impact of what happened at that base on the night of April 25 is something no number can fully express. From senior generals sitting in meeting rooms in Moscow to the lowest-ranking contract soldiers stationed at bases scattered across Russian territory, the message is the same and undeniable. There is no longer any place on Russian territory that is absolutely safe. Bases once considered impregnable, Chelyabinsk, where the Su-57 was born, the Alenia base on the Kola Peninsula home to the Northern Air Force, Mozdok with its strategic role in the entire southern defense structure are all in a state of constant alert, knowing that no distance, no defense system, no geographic barrier can still guarantee their safety. The backbone logistics hubs feeding the entire war machine, Voronezh, Rostov, Kursk, know they are now within Ukraine's new calculation range, in an equation they did not need to worry about just a few months ago. The Ural range, once considered an impregnable natural defensive line throughout Russian military history, the geographic boundary that centuries of strategic thinking had built as the final shield, has now become the graveyard of assets Putin once believed were invincible. Russian territory is no longer a fortress, it has become an open hunting ground. And while Russia struggles with that new reality, Ukraine sits in a completely different position at the negotiating table, a position no one could have imagined just a few years ago. The capability to strike Shagol with completely domestically produced weapons, without needing American ATACMS missiles, without British Storm Shadow, without permission or approval from Washington or Brussels, puts Ukraine in a negotiating position that no side can deny or ignore. On April 28, just 3 days after the Shagol attack, the SBU chief publicly declared a sentence I want you to listen to carefully. 500 to 2,000 kilometers deep into Russian territory is no longer a peaceful rear. This was not a warning. This was not rhetorical bluster. This was a policy declaration, a clear statement of capability and the will to use that capability made by a country that has proven it can do what it says. Kiev is no longer the side that needs protection, needs permission, needs the West's nod before every strategic decision. Ukraine is creating its own strategic leverage, and that changes the calculations of every party involved. America is reassessing the level of support needed. Europe is recalculating its role in a new security structure, and Moscow is facing an opponent it can no longer define merely by what the West is willing to provide. And now look to the future, because what is coming is even more noteworthy than what has already happened. Lyuty already has a 2,000 kilometers range today, and Ukraine is producing the FP1 at a rate of about 100 units per day, with no sign that rate will slow. Targets now within current range, not the future, but right now, include Engels Base with its 295s and 2-160s stationed there, Chelyabinsk with Russia's entire aviation weapons development program, strategic ammunition depots in the Ekaterinburg region, and West Siberian oil refineries supplying fuel for Russia's entire economic and military machine. All of those are already within Lyuty's reach today, with no need to wait for any future version. And the message Shagol sent is not only for Moscow. America has replicated Operation Spiderweb at Eglin Base, analyzed every detail, and drawn the conclusion that cheap drones can wipe out a base containing F-35s, the most expensive and advanced in America's arsenal. That conclusion has directly driven the $175 billion Golden Dome program. Think about that for a second. The world's #1 superpower, with the largest defense budget in human history, feels the need to spend $175 billion to protect its own territory from the threat of drones costing a few tens of thousands of dollars. If that is the reality America is facing, then Russia, with fewer resources, more outdated defense technology, a sanctions-cut supply chain, and an enemy producing 100 drones per day right on its doorstep, is facing a problem for which it has no answer. So let me conclude with 3 things that have changed permanently after the night of April 25. Not temporarily, not reversibly, but permanently. First, the doctrine of an impregnable rear is dead. The Ural Mountains are no longer a natural defensive line, so 700 kilometers is no longer a shield. And there is no point on the map of Russian territory that the Moscow command can point to and say, this place is safe with the confidence they once had. Second, GPS jammers, something Russia invested billions of rubles in and once trusted like a trump card, are no longer a reliable shield because AI optical guidance has completely and calmly surpassed them, without needing GPS to find its way, without needing any external signal to know where it is and where it needs to go. And third, the asymmetric cost ratio has tilted decisively and irreversibly toward cheap, smart, and mass-produced drones. The 1,000 to 1 ratio is something no traditional military doctrine written in the 20th century has an answer for, and Russia is having to learn to live with it in real time, on real battlefields, with real losses for which no contingency plan was prepared. The night of April 25 was not just an attack. It was proof that in modern warfare, there is no longer any safe rear, and no one told Moscow in advance. If you want to continue following analyses like this, what is really happening behind the headlines, why it matters, and how it changes the situation, hit subscribe right now so you don't miss any videos. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next video.